In his address to the nation on 12th of May, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced a financial package of 20 trillion rupees. This would be nearly 10% of India's GDP. The package is to boost the economy, which has been hit severely with the coronavirus pandemic choking demand and disrupting supply chains globally. The Prime Minister emphasized the opportunities that lay in this crisis and called for India to work towards becoming Atma-nirbhar or self-reliant. He also spoke of being vocal about local in an indication that this was the time to give a boost to local produce and brands in a big way. The contours of the package, he said, would be revealed by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman over the next few days. In the first of a series of briefings that she is to hold, the Finance Minister announced a slew of measures to boost the country's MSME sector, besides other steps to spur demand. To understand the whole package and what it might do to revive the economy, let's take a deep dive with AKB. So how large is the economic package that Mr. Modi has announced?
The package is quite large. This is an economic package, and as you pointed out, this is about 10% of India's GDP. People were expecting a package of about 3% of GDP or 5% of GDP. Nobody thought that the Prime Minister will be able to rustle up these schemes and funds to announce a package that is as much as 10% of GDP. Remember, Japan has announced a package of 21% of GDP. The US has done something little more than 11 or 13% of GDP. So there are very few countries, we have large countries which have announced a package of this volume. The important thing to note here is that this package will have two components. One part of the package will provide funds and transfer of maybe cash to people, to companies, to medium enterprises, to small enterprises. And the other part of the package, I would imagine, would constitute fiscal concessions, tax concessions, which would mean kind of a revenue outgo or a revenue loss, and that will be a fiscal stimulus. So what the Prime Minister announced is an economic package. This probably would include some financial transfers, some financial outlays, and probably some fiscal concessions. So we have to see in the various installments that are being released by the Finance Minister how much of this 20 trillion rupees is transfer of funds, expenditure, and fiscal concessions.
So overall, where will the money to finance this package come from?
Very important question. Nobody in the government as of now is answering this question to anybody's satisfaction. The important thing to note here is the government is insisting that this is an economic package. So therefore, if you are expecting the government to spend 20 trillion rupees more, probably you are expecting the wrong thing. It is not a fiscal stimulus. It is an economic package. So therefore, what the government is going to do is, the government will act as a facilitator and provide funds to schemes which will be run by various public sector companies which will implement those schemes. So the total impact of these schemes would probably be close to 20 trillion rupees. So if you are counting each of the schemes and see what is the government's contribution to that scheme, that amount will be far less. For example, the MSME package that was announced is close to around 6 trillion rupees. Now, out of 6 trillion rupees, the government's outgo will probably be not more than 30,000 crore or so. So the government is being a facilitator of creating these schemes. Government is providing a kind of a seed fund or a guarantee to provide to support to those schemes. So the government's fiscal capacity is not strained, but the overall impact will be hopefully larger. That's why the government decided to include the RBI's refinancing packages as well as those targeted long-term repo auctions, which is essentially trying to increase liquidity in the system as part of the package. Almost 6.5 lakh crore or 6.5 trillion rupees of RBI's interventions have been included in this 20 trillion package. So, which is why we should keep in mind the fact that this is not a fiscal package, this is an economic package in which the government's own finances will probably play a very small role, relatively small role. And one indication probably is that the government has increased its borrowing limit only by rupees 4.2 trillion. In other words, from around 7.8 trillion already provided for in the budget, they've increased the borrowing limit to 12 trillion rupees. So this increase gives you an idea what kind of impact the government is expecting from the package on the fisc.
So what is the significance of Mr. Modi's focus on self-reliance?
Well, I think Mr. Modi's address is being talked about because of this 20 trillion rupees economic package. But I think as important as that 20 trillion economic package is his focus on a policy that will encourage self-reliance. Now, this policy in itself may have many adverse implications for the economy. It may run the risk of protectionism. It may encourage higher import tariffs. It may create uncompetitiveness within the domestic economy. It may encourage inefficiencies. But the heart of Mr. Modi's economic philosophy, which he enunciated during his address, is that he wants to see domestic companies to grow big, play a larger role, and become big players within the country. Which is why he was talking about local markets, local manufacturing, and local resources. So the idea was, as you also mentioned, that get vocal about local. Some of the government officials have explained that this does not mean that the government or the economy or the country will turn away from foreign investment or liberalization as such. But if you want to encourage self-reliance by giving protection to domestic economy or domestic companies, then I would imagine a certain degree of uncompetitive behavior will be visible, and that might hurt consumer choices. So in a sense, there are dangers of going back in time if the policy of self-reliance is not carefully implemented without those dangers.
Has Nirmala Sitharaman's first package lived up to the expectations that the Prime Minister's address had aroused?
Well, in terms of the financial package, which is the 20 trillion rupees package, as I said, that this first package, the total size of the economic package and not the government contribution was around 6 trillion rupees. So you can say that already around 8 trillion rupees package was announced, because if you take around 6.5 trillion rupees of RBI intervention, another 1.7 trillion from the government in its package that it announced in the last week of March, and then you have got another 6 trillion rupees for the MSME sector. So what you are seeing is that almost 3/4 of the package that Mr. Modi was announced is already behind us. So in the coming installments, you will see some more announcements. So a large part of that 20 trillion economic package has been announced, so to say. But what is important is that Mrs. Sitharaman fulfilled one other goal or idea of Mr. Modi, which is to create self-reliant India or Atma-nirbhar India, which is by ensuring that the government's procurement plans will not rely on any global supplies. That global tendering facility for any government procurement project below 200 crore rupees is being taken away. In other words, the domestic companies or the MSMEs, there are about 5,000 medium enterprises in this country. There are another around 30,000 small companies. Now these will largely benefit from this when they will not have to face global competition through global tendering for any government procurement or any government project which is less than rupees 200 crore value. So this is exactly what Mr. Modi talked about when he elucidated his concept of self-reliant India, wherein domestic companies will get an edge over foreign suppliers.
So how important is Ms. Sitharaman's package for the MSME sector?
Well, it's quite important, to provide 3 lakh crore of collateral-free loans for the MSME sector is quite important. As I said, that the government's contribution will be very, very limited, a few thousand crores, but it will be riding on banks. So the banks will have to provide these loans, and the collateral free nature of these loans will make these loans a little risky for banks. But the MSMEs who want to come back into their business after the lockdown will certainly be benefited. There is also an announcement that has been made for clearing all payments to medium and small units from the government in the next 45 days. To my mind, this is a big announcement because the private sector has been complaining about payments from government being withheld for several months. Now, if this is implemented for the MSME sector, I think a large a section of these MSME companies are complaining about cash flow. So payment delays being eliminated in 45 days for the MSME sector will mean more cash flow, more liquidity for these MSME units. So that, to my mind, is a big move.
What reforms did you see in the Finance Minister's first package?
Well, I think if you're looking at reforms, there is a promise of a change in the definition for medium, small and micro units. It was long overdue. What used to happen earlier is that we used to have different definitions on the basis of investments in plant and machinery for manufacturing companies and services companies. Now this definition has been completely changed. There is this the separate definition for investment in plant and machinery for manufacturing companies and services have been done away with. There is only one definition for services as well as manufacturing companies, and the limits have been raised, and the two limits have been given both for investment in plant and machinery as well as turnover. So to my mind, this is not completely doing away with the structure, which would have been radical reform, but what the government has done is adopted a gradual way, a gradual system of raising these limits so that the companies in this sector do not feel threatened if they grow. Earlier, if you grow beyond a certain limit, you lose all the benefits. So now at least they can grow, increase investments as well as grow their turnovers, and yet remain within the category of MSME and enjoy those benefits as long as they are within those limits of investment and turnover. So that, to my mind, is incremental reform, but reform nevertheless.
Middle class taxpayers were expecting a lot. Is there enough for them in this package?
I don't think there is enough for the middle class income taxpayers, although Mr. Modi's announcement on May 12 did talk about benefits for the middle class taxpayers. The only benefit that I see for the middle class taxpayers is by way of tax deduction at source or tax collection at source. That has been reduced by 25% from 10% TDS to 7.5%. But even this facility is restricted to only those who are receiving professional income or rent or dividend, like that. The salaried class continues to pay TDS, so the benefits are very, very limited. There is an announcement about the EPF contribution liability for the employees to be reduced by 2%, so that the income tax payee probably has more money in his or her hands, so it will mean more cash. But there is no, the EPF might give them more cash, but to that extent your investment in your provident fund will be less. If your TDS comes down, you don't get actual relief. You are getting a kind of a temporary liquidity benefit. Instead of paying 10%, you are paying 7.5%. But remember, when you file your income tax return at the end of the year, you have to pay up whatever is due to the tax. So it is a temporary relief. Yes, the Vivad Se Vishwas scheme has been extended till December 31, 2020. So that is a relief for those high income companies, high income individuals and companies who want to take advantage of this amnesty scheme, and they can apply for it without paying any penalty. And finally, there is this facility given to the direct taxpayers, that their date of filing returns have been extended till November 30, 2020 instead of July 31, 2020. So that also, to my mind, is a relief. But if you are talking about tax relief, I don't see any tax relief that has been announced so far. Maybe you can expect some tax relief in the coming installments that the Finance Minister will be announcing soon.
Thank you for joining us. We will be back next week with another deep dive with AKB. As some parts of India stay locked down, Business Standard is providing free access to its premium content for a month on businessstandard.com. Check the link given in description to claim your free subscription. Do follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram for more.